My daughter laughed the moment her eyes caught mine at the auction. Not a laugh meant for joy, no, it was tight, clipped, polished down to a blade. It struck me like the sharp edge of silver scraping an empty glass. She stood near the front in a fitted beige blazer, her shoulders pulled back, her hand draped casually, almost possessively, over the arm of her husband. Her lips barely moved, her words slipped like a whisper meant only for me. "Say goodbye to your house," she said, voice low and cutting. "Someone else will mow your lawn from now on." I didn't answer. I let silence swallow me whole, though my chest burned. Instead, my eyes drifted outward, clinging to the details around me as though they could hold me together. The rows of cheap folding chairs lined up with military precision. The auctioneer, hair slicked and shining under the glare of fluorescent lights, shuffled his papers with the rhythm of a man too used to dismantling lives. The murmur of muted conversations floated around me, threads of indifference, stitched together with the acrid smell of carpet cleaner and the bitter bite of bad coffee. 2 seats away, a man sat with a glossy booklet spread across his lap. The image on the cover pierced me harder than any blade could. My porch, my porch. The one where I once sat rocking my granddaughter, her small hands tugging at the strings of the wind chimes while her laughter tumbled into the air. The caption beneath the photograph was merciless in its simplicity. Lot number 7, 3-bedroom family home, needs modernization. The bidding hadn't begun. Not yet. They hadn't expected me to show my face here, let alone to sit in the 5th row in my best coat, my handbag pressed tight against my hip like a weapon I dared anyone to take from me. I wasn't supposed to come. I was supposed to remain invisible, silent, tucked away like a forgotten story, left on a shelf no one ever bothers to read again. But I was not forgotten. I was not finished. I was still here, still breathing, still mine, and I was ready to remind them all how I had gotten here and why I was not going quietly. That story, the longer one, began 2 weeks earlier. I was in the kitchen folding laundry, the dull rhythm of fabric against fabric keeping me company. That was when I noticed it, an envelope tucked carelessly among the stack of local advertisements. No return address. For a moment, I almost threw it away, dismissed it as another flyer, but something about the sharpness of the fold, the weight of it in my hand, made me pause. I slid a finger under the edge, tore it open. Inside was a printed announcement for a public estate auction. My eyes drifted down, and there, in the thin line of fine print, I saw it. Lot number 7, 14 Windmere Lane, my address, my home. The paper trembled between my fingers. I sat down slowly, the chair cold beneath me. It had to be a mistake. It had to. But I read it again, and again, each time the words burning clearer. My house, my name, and beneath it, the typewritten cruelty sale, authorized, under power of attorney. I remembered the day she'd asked me to sign. Jeanette, my daughter, her smile warm, her tone sweet with concern. "Just for convenience, Mom," she had said, "in case anything happens." Medical forms, bills, things that need quick decisions. It was 2 winters ago after I had slipped on the ice and broken my wrist. Vulnerable, hurting, I had nodded. I trusted her. She was my daughter. I never imagined she would wield it against me like a weapon. I called her immediately, my voice shaking, pulled tight like wire. "Jeanette, I got something strange in the mail today." There was a pause, the silence of someone calculating. "Oh?" An auction listing, with my address printed on it. Another pause, then a sigh. "Oh, that." Her voice dropped into something final. "I meant to talk to you. It's time, Mom. That house, it's too much for you." "It's my house," I whispered, the words catching. "I know," she said, the sweetness in her tone curdling, "but it isn't safe anymore, and frankly, it's an asset that could be put to use." I could hardly breathe. "Useful to whom?" She sighed again, the sound sharp, annoyed. "Don't make this harder than at Island. You'll have a lovely place at Meadow Hills. Everything's taken care of. Meals, laundry, your own little garden. It's better this way." "I'm not going anywhere," I said. Her voice hardened. "You already signed the power of attorney, remember? It's done." That night, I didn't sleep. I walked through every room as though I were already a ghost haunting it. I traced my fingers along the piano where my husband once played. I smoothed the lace on the old lamp I had carried home from Ohio in '72. My life was not a liability. My memories were not a burden. The next morning, I made 2 calls, one to a lawyer, one to the bank. I didn't have millions, but I had enough. Enough to make a point, enough to fight. And so here I was, in the 5th row, sitting tall in my best coat, my handbag close at my side, watching my daughter's smug smile flicker as the auctioneer raised his gavel. He began with smaller properties. Lot number 1, lot number 3, applause, nods, numbers exchanged. Then his voice rang out, steady and merciless. Lot number 7, a charming 3-bedroom home on Windmere Lane. I watched Jeanette perk up, lean forward, waiting for the bidding to begin, waiting for anyone but me to lift a paddle. The auctioneer called for an opening bid, and I raised my hand, paddle steady, unflinching. The air shifted. A ripple of whispers moved through the room. My daughter spun toward me, her face pale, her eyes wide with disbelief. "Mother," she hissed, stepping forward. But I wasn't the quiet woman she thought I was. I wasn't the fool who signed papers without reading. I wasn't the easy mark anymore. I said nothing. I kept my arm raised. The bidding began, and I did not lower my hand. The day I learned about the auction, I sat in the living room for hours, just breathing, listening. The silence of the house was different that day, tight, watching me as if it too had heard the news and was waiting for my answer. I stood up, walked to the corner where David's chair used to be, rested my hand on the empty space. "Don't worry," I whispered. "I'm not letting them take you." I'm not sure if I meant David or the house or something else altogether. That evening, I pulled out the folder, marked important, the one I hadn't touched since the year after David died. It had everything: deeds, insurance, a safety deposit box key, and the small ledger notebook I'd kept for decades. Every time I dipped into savings, every time I lent Jeanette money, I wrote it down. I turned to the last page. There was still enough, maybe not to outbid a developer, but enough to make noise, to make them look at me, to say, "I was here. I built this. You don't get to." Erase me with a gavel, not without a fight. Jeanette wasn't always like this. There were years, distant, blurry years, when she clung to my skirt at preschool drop-off and cried if I so much as glanced toward the door. When she'd curl up beside me on the couch, her small hand clutching mine, whispering secrets about butterflies and monsters under the bed. She used to call me Mama in a voice so soft it could undo me for days. That little girl is gone, replaced by a woman with sharp lipstick and sharper eyes. I still remember the exact moment I realized she had left and someone else had taken her place. It wasn't one of those loud arguments or dramatic scenes. No, it was quiet. That's what made it hurt so much. It was 5 years ago on a Tuesday. She came over to help with the bills, or so she said. I'd asked her to look over some medical insurance papers. David always handled those things, and after he passed, the numbers started swimming on the page. Jeanette sat at the table with her sleek laptop open, typing and clicking with brisk efficiency, barely looking up. "Mom," she said suddenly without ceremony, "you should really think about selling." I paused. "Selling what?" "The house." I thought I misheard her. She sighed. "It's too much for you. You're living alone in 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, and a yard the size of a small park. It's inefficient, and honestly, it's not safe." Safe. The word lingered like a mosquito. She always hid behind safety, convenience, efficiency, what was best. I told her I wasn't interested, that the house was fine, that I had a system, a rhythm. But I saw it then, the look, that pinched expression that said, "Here we go again, my stubborn, outdated, impossible mother." She didn't argue. She just closed her laptop and said, "We'll revisit this later." And she did. Every holiday, every phone call, every awkward lunch in that overpriced cafe she loved, she'd circle back to it. "When are you going to downsize? Wouldn't you prefer something modern?" Have you looked at Meadow Hills? They have heated floors and a book club. At first, I thought she was just concerned. But over time, her concern began to sound a lot like impatience. And then there were the favors. They started small, a few hundred for a car repair. Then it was help with the down payment on their new house. Then the tutoring fees for Lily, her daughter, always with a promise to pay it back, though nothing ever returned. Still, I gave. That's what mothers do, isn't it? We give and give and give. Until we're dry bones, smiling politely in the corner, hoping someone remembers we used to matter. When she brought the power of attorney papers, it was disguised as care in case of emergency. She said it's just a backup. You don't even need to think about it. I should. I have asked more questions. I should have had someone read it. But I signed. I trusted her. That trust ended the day I found my house in an auction catalog. I didn't yell when I called her. I didn't cry. But something in my voice must have shifted because she responded like I was being unreasonable, like I was standing in the way of progress. Mom, you're being emotional. This is what's best for everyone. Everyone. She said it so easily, as if I wasn't part of that word. She didn't think I'd fight. She thought I'd fold just like always, nod and smile and retreat into my crocheting while they dismantled my life one brick at a time. But something in me, something old and quiet and fierce woke up. You don't get to erase me. That night, I sat in the kitchen, the same chair David always used, and made a list, not of grievances, though I could. I have filled pages, but of things I remembered, the things Jeanette had forgotten or chosen to forget, how she sobbed when her first boyfriend broke her heart and I made her grilled cheese at midnight, how I stayed up all night sewing her Halloween costume the year she wanted to be a comet, how I drove 6 hours through a snowstorm when Lily was born because Jeanette was too scared to be alone. I wasn't just a name on a deed. I was the hands that held her, the voice that calmed her, the roof that sheltered her. But now I was an asset. A week before the auction, I called Lily. My granddaughter, she's 23 now, lives 2 states away, but she still sends postcards, little doodles in the margins. Still calls me Nana like she's 5. She picked up on the first ring. Nana? I smiled. Hi, sweetheart. You. Okay? You sound funny. I hesitated. I just wanted to hear your voice. We talked for 15 minutes about her job, her cat, a book she thought I'd like. She didn't know about the auction. I didn't tell her. Some betrayals are too heavy to pass down. After we hung up, I knew what I had to do. I wasn't. I'm just going to show up. I was going to raise my paddle. Not to win, not necessarily, but to remind them I was still here and I wasn't leaving quietly. The worst part wasn't the betrayal. It was the way Jeanette tried to convince herself she hadn't done anything wrong. The morning after our phone call, the one where she told me, calm as you please, that selling my house was already in motion, I found an envelope in the mailbox, a thick one, no return address, but I recognized her handwriting on the front for review. Inside were 3 glossy brochures. Meadow Hills, Retirement Redefined, Riverview Terrace, Peaceful Living for Independent Adults, Piner Grove Village, where comfort meets care. I flipped through them in silence. Cheerful stock photos of gray-haired people playing board games and drinking tea on sun-drenched patios. Everything clean, white, overly bright. Everyone smiling like they'd never lost a single thing in their lives. One page had a mock floor plan, a studio, apartment barely bigger than my laundry room. It showed a little couch, a kitchenette, a twin bed in the corner. No dining room, no porch, no space for the grandfather clock David's father built, no wall long enough to hang the family quilt. On the last page of one brochure, someone had circled a line in blue pen. Private garden boxes available upon request. A box, not a yard, not a tree to lean on, just a box. I placed the brochures on the counter, one beside the other, and stared at them like they were foreign language textbooks, and then I folded them neatly and dropped them into the trash. At lunch, Jeanette called again. I just want to make sure you had time to look at those options, she said, like she was reminding me to try the salmon special at a restaurant. I did, I said. And they're not for me, she sighed. That heavy theatrical sigh that people use when they want to seem patient but are in fact boiling with irritation. Mom, we've been over this. No, I corrected her. You've decided I haven't discussed anything. There was a pause. You're making this harder than it needs to be. I wanted to laugh. I wanted to scream. But instead, I reached for my tea and said, No, dear. You are. She hung up not long after, said she had a meeting, promised we'd talk soon, but I knew we wouldn't. That night, I couldn't sleep. My head throbbed with a dull pressure, like my brain was pressing against the inside of my skull, trying to escape. I paced, touched the back of the armchair, ran my fingers over the keys of the piano, dusty and unused, sat at the kitchen table until the sunrise slipped between the curtains and lit up the dust in the air like gold flakes. I called the lawyer at 8:01 a.m. His name was Philip Gordon. He was younger than I expected, early 42nds, with kind eyes and a wedding ring. He twisted when he was nervous. I'd chosen him because he came highly recommended by Mary Kloss, a friend from church who recently set up her own trust fund. Philip listened carefully as I told him everything about the power of attorney, the auction, the brochures, my daughter. He didn't interrupt, just nodded, took notes, occasionally raised an eyebrow. When I finished, he leaned back and said, Mrs. Morgan, I'm going to be blunt. This isn't uncommon, but it is unethical. Depending on how the power of attorney was worded and when it was invoked, we may have options. Can I stop the sale? I asked. Possibly, but we'd have to act fast. Once it goes through the public auction system, it'll be harder to reverse. What if I just buy it myself? He looked surprised, then smiled. You could. That would certainly make a statement. I nodded. I want to make one. He walked me through the legal logistics, what I'd need to do at the bank, how to authorize a hold on any financial transactions tied to the power of attorney, how to formally revoke it. We drew up the paperwork together. He didn't question my choice. He didn't condescend. He treated me like a client, a person. That was more respect than I'd had from my own daughter in years. Afterward, I went straight to the bank. My branch manager, Michelle, was a no-nonsense woman in her 52nds who wore crisp blazers and remembered everyone's birthday. She greeted me by name, sat me in her glass-walled office, and listened without blinking as I explained. Do you want me to freeze the account? Access under her name? She asked. Yes. And redirect all notifications to you? Yes. Her fingers flew over the keyboard. It's done. That was it. No fireworks. No thunderclaps. Just a quiet moment in a quiet office where a woman finally said, No more. I walked out of the bank and into the bright afternoon sun, feeling taller somehow. Not stronger, not yet, but steadier. Like my spine remembered how to stand on its own again. That night, I took out a small notebook I hadn't opened in years. It was blue, leather-bound, a birthday gift from David on my 60th. I used to write memories in it, little things. The first. At a time, Lily said, Grandma, what Jeanette looked like on her wedding day, the way David's hand always found mine under the dinner table. I flipped to a blank page. The 10th of September. Today I stopped being afraid. Today I said no. And tomorrow I'll go to the auction. It was Lily who told me the exact time and place, not on purpose. She called the night before the auction, cheerful as ever, talking about her new apartment and the weird neighbor who plays jazz at 2 a.m. And oh, Mom says she's taking tomorrow off for something important. Big family errand. Some kind of signing, I think. She was vague. What kind of signing? I asked, trying to keep my voice level. Don't know, Lily said lightly. She and Rob were arguing about parking permits or something. You know them. Anyway, I think she's dragging him downtown. I offered to watch Milo, but they said they'd be gone just a couple. Hours. She mentioned a courthouse, or maybe the city building. That was enough. She didn't know. Jeanette hadn't told her what she was doing. I almost felt grateful for that. After we hung up, I sat at the dining room table for a long time. The house, it was quiet. My cup of tea had gone cold. Outside, the street lamp flickered like it always did after midnight. I imagined her signing papers in a crisp blazer, hair perfect, pen gliding over the lines that would hand my home to a stranger. I pictured her laughing at some joke Rob made, maybe saying something like, "Well, it's just a building. She'll adjust." But I wouldn't. I knew that. Now, I thought about not going, letting it happen, letting her carry the weight of what she'd done, letting silence be my final reply. But that wasn't me. Not anymore. At 7 the next morning, I dressed, carefully. Navy blue dress, the one with the simple pleats and the small pearl buttons, the same dress I wore to David's retirement dinner, the same one I wore when Jeanette won her first science fair, the same one I almost threw away but didn't. I pinned my hair up, added a touch of lipstick, not for them, for me, and I packed a folder, bank documents, identification, a letter from the lawyer just in case. I wasn't going there to make a scene. I was going to be present, to stand in my truth. The auction hall was in the old municipal building on Ashbury Street. I hadn't been there in years. Not since Lily's high school graduation, when they held the ceremony in the same room. It looked smaller now, folding chairs in rows. A podium at the front, a projector screen glowing faintly with the words Riverville Estate Sale, 11 a.m. I walked in, heart steady, and then I saw her, Jeanette, sitting in the second row, her tablet in one hand, phone in the other, Rob beside her, flipping through a catalog. They were whispering, smiling, confident, comfortable. She didn't notice me at the fleck. First, I found a seat in the 5th row, set my folder on my lap, crossed my ankles, waited. More people trickled in. A few in suits, a couple that looked like flippers, cheap shoes, quiet chatter, an older man with a notepad and a real estate badge clipped to his shirt. Then the auctioneer stepped up. "Good morning, folks. We'll begin shortly. Please make sure you've registered and picked up your paddles." I held mine in both hands. The room settled, and then Jeanette turned, saw me. Our eyes met. She blinked once like she wasn't sure I was real. Then her face changed. Not panic, not yet, but discomfort, a tightening around the mouth, a flicker of something behind the eyes. She nudged Rob, murmured, "Something." He turned too, looked at me, and frowned. I didn't move. I just sat there upright, composed, ready. Let her wonder, let her sweat, let her feel finally what it was like to be seen. There's a particular kind of silence that happens just before a public fight. Auction begins. It's not the silence of reverence or nerves. It's the silence of calculation. People glance at each other sideways, mentally measuring wallets, confidence, territory. I'd never been in a room like that before, but I recognized the energy. It was the same one I used to feel in the PTA meetings when Jeanette was in middle school. The mothers all subtly posturing, pretending they weren't competing while doing exactly that. The auctioneer, a man in his 60 seconds with a tan too orange to be natural, cleared his throat into the microphone. "Let's get started. Lot number 1. My house was lot number 7. I listened carefully, not to the items, but to the people. 1. Man always opened the bidding. A woman in the 3rd row always raised after him. The flippers at the back barely moved, but jotted things down furiously. Jeanette didn't raise her paddle once. For the first 6 lots, she just watched. She wasn't here for anything else, only the house. She was waiting. When they reached lot number 7, I felt a shift, a breath held. The auctioneer glanced at his notes. "Next up, lot 7, a 3-bedroom, 2-bath home on Windmere Lane. Great Bones. Prime neighborhood. Property has been cleared for expedited transfer. Shall we start the bidding at $120,000? Jeanette's hand moved instantly. Paddle. Up. Her number 103. 125. The auctioneer nodded. Do I hear? 130? Another paddle shot up. Someone behind me. Jeanette's head turned. Sharply. She wasn't expecting competition. Thank you, the auctioneer said. 130. Do. I hear 135? There was a pause, and I raised my paddle. Not fast, not timid, just steady, deliberate. The room didn't gasp. Life isn't a soap opera, but there was a definite ripple. Heads turned. Jeanette did a full double take. I looked her straight in the eye. She blinked, then narrowed her eyes like she thought she must be. Misunderstanding. The auctioneer glanced down. Paddle 117135. Do I hear 140? Jeanette raised her paddle again, her lips tight. 140. I raised mine again. 145. Now there were murmurs. Someone leaned toward their neighbor and whispered something. I didn't care. I wasn't bidding to win. I was bidding because it was mine, because they needed to know I hadn't given up my voice just because I'd gotten quiet over the years. Jeanette turned to Rob, whispered sharply. He shook his head. She looked forward again. 150, she said under her breath, raising her paddle. 150 to number 103. Do I hear 155? I didn't move. Not yet. Let her sweat. The auctioneer looked around. 150 going once. I raised my paddle. Slowly. 155. Jeanette's face flushed. I could see the color rising up her neck. She raised again. 160. The auctioneer seemed amused. Now we have a real contest here, folks. I raised again. 165. My voice was calm. My hands weren't shaking. This wasn't about money. Not for me. Jeanette stood up, the only person in the room on her feet. Excuse me, she said loudly. I'd like a word with the auctioneer, please. He looked startled. Ma'am, we're in the middle of bidding. I understand, she said tight-lipped. But I believe there's a misunderstanding. That woman, she gestured at me, is our mother? She doesn't have the right. Actually, I do. My voice didn't boom, but it cut through the room like thread through silk. Everyone turned. I stood, slowly. From my bag, I pulled a folder. Legal revocation of power of attorney, signed and notarized, effective as of 3 days ago, filed with the county clerk and attached to the title. Jeanette froze. The auctioneer stepped down from the platform, took the folder, looked through the papers. He glanced up at me, then at Jeanette. This changes things, he said quietly. Jeanette's mouth opened, closed. Her face was a storm of disbelief, confusion, fury. Mom, she said, almost a hiss. What are you doing? Something I should have done a long time ago, I said. There was no applause, no dramatic music, just a long, loaded silence. The auctioneer cleared his throat. Given this new information, we'll need to pause the sale of lot number 7. Please take a brief recess while we confirm legal documents. People stood up, talked in hushed voices. Some stared at me, some stared at her. Jeanette turned back to Rob. He looked like he wanted to be anywhere else. I sat back down, calm, certain. I wasn't here to perform. I was here to take back my life. She followed me out into the hallway like I knew she would. The auctioneer had called a 15-minute recess, giving everyone time to stretch their legs and, in his words, gather clarity. The air outside the bidding room smelled faintly of lemon polish and dust. One of those old government buildings that had been scrubbed 1,000 times and never quite lost the scent of old paper and aging linoleum. Mom, Jeanette said sharply, heels clicking behind me. What the hell are you doing? I turned slowly. She stood, 10 feet away, arms crossed, chin lifted like she always did when she wanted to. Seemed taller than she was. I'm stopping you, I said plainly. From what? From stealing my house, she scoffed. You're being dramatic. No, I replied. You are. You just didn't think I'd notice. Her mouth opened, but I raised a hand. Don't, I said. Not now. I gave you years to speak, years to say something honest. Now you listen. She hesitated clearly, torn between storming off and doubling down. She chose the second. You don't. I know what you're doing, she said. You're letting your emotions get in the way of what's smart. No, I said again quietly. I'm finally letting my emotions speak. After a lifetime of making everything convenient for you, she rolled her eyes. It's not about convenience. Isn't it? I asked. Then what was that brochure you mailed? Meadow Hills, Pine, Grove, boxes painted like homes, her cheeks colored. You need care. I need honesty, I said, and respect. Jeanette looked around as if checking to see who might be watching. Then she stepped closer. This is embarrassing, she hissed. You, showing up here like this, making a scene. I haven't raised my voice once, I said, calmly. You're embarrassed because for the first time in years, you can't control the story, she flinched. I never meant to hurt you, she muttered. But you did. Her eyes met mine then, and, for the first time in a long time, she looked like the girl I once held at the end of the hallway after her first nightmare. Confused, defensive, scared of being wrong, I thought. She began. I thought you didn't care, that you'd be relieved, that the house was too much. You never asked. Her silence said everything. You decided, I went on. You and Rob, you looked at the balance sheets, at the square footage, at the size of the yard. You saw numbers, work, inconvenience. You didn't see me. That's not fair, she said. No, I agreed. It's not, she sighed, rubbing the bridge of her nose. So what now? Now, I said, you let me finish what you tried to start. You watch as I buy back the house you tried to sell from under me. You're actually going through with this? Yes, you don't even need that house anymore. It's not about need. It's about choice, about dignity. She stared at me, jaw tight. You'd really rather spend your savings just to make a point. No, I said softly. I'd rather not have to. I'd rather my daughter saw me as a person, not a transaction. But here we are. There was a pause, long and aching. You're being spiteful, she finally said. And you're being small, I replied. She blinked. If I'm spiteful, I added, I learned it from the silence I've been swallowing for decades, her eyes filled with something, anger maybe, or fear, or shame. I didn't push. We stood there, two women bound by blood and disappointment, the hallway between us filled with years we couldn't rewrite. I have to get back inside, I said at last. I'll contest it, she said. Half a threat, half a question. You can try, I said, my voice calm. But you won't win. I walked past her then, the smell of her perfume lingering, familiar and distant all at once. For a moment I thought she might reach out, grab my sleeve, say something real. She didn't. Back inside, the auctioneer was shuffling his notes, murmuring into his headset. The room buzzed with quiet energy. Rob sat in the front row, hunched and frowning as if trying to shrink. I returned to my seat. My folder still lay neatly in my lap. When the auctioneer looked up, his eyes met mine. He gave a tiny nod. Lot 7, he said, voice regaining its rhythm. We are postponing the sale, pending legal review of ownership rights. At this time, the property is no longer available for bidding. A few people grumbled. One man stood and left. Someone else muttered. Knew that it'd get messy. I sat very still. It was done. Not won, not celebrated, but stopped. And that was enough for today. The auction wrapped up half an hour later. No one looked at me as they left, but I could feel the stares brushing past, curious, cautious, occasionally pitying. I didn't mind. I wasn't there for them. Jeanette didn't return to the room. I saw Rob leave alone, walking. Quickly, shoulders tight, phone pressed to his ear. I imagined the conversation. Something clipped, tense, full of sharp corners. I didn't envy him. I didn't hate him either. He was just a man who let himself believe the path of least resistance was always the smartest one. A lot of people do. When the room emptied, I remained in my seat. I needed a moment. Not to rest exactly, but to sit with what had happened, to feel it, not just survive it. The auctioneer approached, folding his clipboard under one arm. "Mrs. Morgan," he said gently. "Miss?" I corrected him. I never changed it. He smiled, nodded. "Miss Morgan, I reviewed the paperwork with our legal consultant. Everything's in order. The revocation stands. And with no valid POA in effect, your property cannot be sold without your explicit consent." "I know. I imagine this hasn't been an easy day." "No," I said, "but it was a necessary one." He hesitated. "I've seen a lot of families come through. Here, most don't say a word. Just sign, nod, move on. But what you did today?" He shook his head slightly. "It mattered." I didn't reply. There wasn't anything to say. He left me with a quiet nod, and I sat a while longer, hands resting on the process, folder in my lap. I had won something, though it didn't feel like triumph. It felt like standing alone in the middle of a once crowded room, finally holding your ground, only to realize how much space silence can take up. When I stepped outside, the sun had shifted. Afternoon light, softer than before, filtered through the branches of the sycamore trees lining Ashbury Street. I walked slowly to the parking lot. And there she was, Jeanette, leaning against her car, arms folded, sunglasses pushed up on her head like she'd forgotten they were there. She wasn't angry anymore, at least not outwardly. She looked tired. "Done?" she asked. "Yes," I said. "I thought maybe you'd leave through the other door. I don't use side exits anymore." That brought the faintest twitch to her lips. Not quite a smile, but close. "I didn't think you'd actually show up," she admitted after a pause. "That was the idea, wasn't it?" I said. "Count on me fading quietly." She didn't argue. I told myself I was helping," she said eventually, "doing the responsible thing, planning ahead. You were planning for your convenience." "Maybe," she admitted, "but I also thought you wouldn't fight it, that maybe you'd even be relieved." I looked at her for a long moment. "You stopped asking me what I wanted a long time ago." Her face tightened. "You stopped telling me." I hadn't expected that, and for a blast. Second, I saw her not as the woman who'd tried to erase me from my own home, but as the child I once raised, still looking for an explanation, still waiting for something soft. "Maybe we both forgot how to talk," I said, quietly. Jeanette looked away. "It's easier to make decisions when you pretend the other person won't argue. It's easier to pretend love looks like protection, even when it's control." She nodded slowly. "So now what?" "I go home," I said, "and you decide what kind of daughter I want to be next." She flinched but didn't walk away. "I'm not asking for money," I added. "Not for visits, not even for apologies. I just want you to stop managing me." Jeanette exhaled. "You always made it so easy to step in." "That's what mothers do," I said. "Until one day they can't or won't." We stood in silence, the kind that didn't ask to be filled. Finally, she stepped aside. Let me know when you get home." I met her gaze. "Why?" "So I know you're safe." It wasn't enough, but it was something. I nodded once, got into my car and drove home. The gate squeaked like it always had. A small sound, metal against metal, barely noticeable to anyone else, but to me it was a kind of welcome. My house had a language of its own, that soft moan of the porch steps, the tick of the hallway clock that was never quite in sync, the faint whistle of wind against the upstairs window when the weather turned. I knew them all. I'd memorized them, without meaning to, like the lines on my own palms. I stepped through the front door and closed it gently behind me. Home. I hadn't realized how deeply I'd braced myself until I was back in that quiet space, until I felt the weight between my Shoulder blades begin to ease, like a breath I'd been holding for too long. Finally released itself. The living room looked just as I'd left it. Of course, it did. No one else had been here. But something had changed. Not the furniture, or the pictures, or the soft throw on the couch. No, it was in me. For the first time in years, the house didn't feel like a waiting room for decline. It felt like a place I'd reclaimed, not just legally, but emotionally, as mine. I kicked off my shoes and walked into the kitchen. The late afternoon sun spilled across the tile in thick amber streaks. I put on the kettle, then leaned on the counter, listening to the water begin its slow climb toward boiling. In the corner, a spider web stretched between two wooden slats on the pantry door. I smiled. Maybe tomorrow I'd clean it. Or maybe I wouldn't. That choice was mine now. I poured my tea and took it to the dining room where the stack of legal papers still. Saturday I hadn't touched them since, the day I'd gone to the lawyer. I opened the folder now and laid the documents, out like a small ceremony. The revocation of power of attorney, the notice of asset protection, the pending trust account still waiting on a final signature, and then the paper that meant the most to me, a revised will. My old will had been written a decade ago. David had still been alive then. Everything was to go to Jeanette, with small mentions of Lily tucked at the bottom. Now things were different. I had left the house to Lily, not out of revenge, not to spite her mother, but because Lily still called, still sent postcards, still said, "I love you," without wanting anything in return. She saw me. That was enough. The rest of my savings I'd divided, some for Lily, some for a women's fund at the local library, and a portion for myself, structured so that no one, no matter how close, could access it on my behalf again. It wasn't about money, it was about peace. I gathered the papers, returned them to the folder, and slid it into the bottom drawer of the secretary desk, locked it. Then I picked up the phone. Lily answered on the second ring. "Nana," she said, "you okay?" "I am," I said, smiling. "I just got home. Was it awful?" "It was necessary." She paused, then lowered her voice. "Mom's not talking at all. She came home, slammed the door, went upstairs. Rob looked like he wanted to disappear. I didn't comment. "I don't know what happened," Lily said. "But whatever it was, I think it shook her." "It should," I said gently. "She didn't tell me anything. I just knew something was wrong. She tried to sell the house, Lily, without telling me, without asking." The silence on the other end of the line went dense. Oh my God. She thought I'd accept it, that I'd be quiet. "What did you do?" I showed up. Another pause. "You are such a badass," Lily said. I laughed loudly, freely. "That's not the word I'd use. It's the one I'm using," she said. "Seriously, I'm proud of you." That made me quiet for a moment, not because I didn't believe her, but because I realized I hadn't heard those words in so long, not from anyone. "Thank you," I said. "Can I come over this weekend? Please do. I'll bring pie. You always say that. And this time, I mean it." We said our goodbyes and I hung up. Outside the sky, it was turning a dusky rose, and the maple tree out front swayed gently in the breeze. I stood at the window, watching. The leaves shift and shimmer. It wasn't over. There would still be conversations, tension, unspoken things sitting heavy in the corners of rooms. But the house was mine again, and more importantly, so was I. It took her 3 days to call, longer than I expected, honestly. I thought she might show up on my porch that same evening, furious or tearful or both. But Janet didn't like messy scenes. She preferred control, order, private, conversations where she could steer the narrative, and I think for once, she didn't know which story to tell. When my phone finally rang, I was in the garden pulling up the last of the summer. Mint before it turned bitter. The screen flashed her name, and for a moment, I just watched it buzz. No part of me rushed to answer. I finished what I was doing, wiped my hands on my apron, and only then picked it up. "Hello." A pause. Then, "Hi, Mom." Her voice was different. flat, cautious. I didn't think you'd answer. You thought right. She sighed. Look, I know things got complicated. They didn't get complicated, I said. You made a choice. And I responded to it. Another pause. I didn't mean for it to go that far. Yes, you did. She bristled. I could hear it in the breath she didn't take. You don't know what it's like, she said suddenly, trying to juggle everything. Work, family, the constant pressure to keep everyone afloat. I wasn't trying to hurt you. I was trying to make things easier. For whom? Her silence was the only answer I needed. I sat on the back porch step, phone to my ear, the garden still, fragrant with damp earth and mint. Somewhere nearby, a neighbor's wind chime offered a soft, uncertain melody. You stopped seeing me as a person, I said. I became a project, a liability, something to handle. That's not true, isn't it? I asked quietly. More silence. I know I didn't ask for help often, I said. I let you think I was fine when I wasn't. I swallowed a lot to keep the peace. But there's a difference between independence and invisibility. I never thought you were invisible. No, I said. You just acted like I had no voice left. She exhaled long and weary. I thought I was doing what Dad would have wanted. That caught me off guard. For a heartbeat, I forgot I was angry. What? What your father would have wanted, I repeated slowly, was for his daughter to treat her mother like someone with a mind and a heart, not like a puzzle to be solved. He hated seeing you struggle, and I hated watching him die. I snapped, but I stayed. I didn't rearrange his life while he was sleeping. I hadn't planned to say that, but once it came out, I didn't regret it. Jeanette didn't reply. I could hear her breathing just that. I didn't do this to shame you, I said. I did it because I refused to be erased. I know, I waited. I'm sorry, she added finally. And it wasn't much, but it didn't sound rehearsed. Good, I said. Now act like it. She let out a soft laugh, surprised, maybe a little wounded. I'm not giving the house back to you if that's what you're calling about. I know. I changed the will. She was quiet. Lily gets it, I said, and I'm moving my savings to an account. No one gets to touch it unless I say so. I get it. I don't think you do, I said more gently this time. But maybe you will. She cleared her throat. Lily told me you're having her over this weekend. Yes, she's closer to you than she is to me sometimes. That's not an accident. I didn't say it to hurt her. I said it because it was true. You can come too if you like, I added after, in a moment. If you're ready to listen, not manage. Jeanette didn't answer right. Away. I'll think about it, she said finally. That's all I ask. We ended the call not as friends, not as mother and daughter the way we used to be, but as two women who understood that something had been broken and that it might never return to its original shape. But maybe, just maybe, something else could be built in its place. I stood, brushed dirt from my knees, and went back to the garden. Lily arrived just after noon on Saturday, arms full of bags and face, glowing like she'd just stepped out of spring. It had been raining all morning, that quiet kind of fall rain that taps softly on the roof and smells of old leaves and damp earth. But when I opened the door, she brought the sun with her. Don't panic, she said, stepping inside. I brought the pie and not store-bought this time. I swear I'll believe it when I taste it, I said, smiling. She laughed, kicked off her boots, and pulled me into a hug that was warm and real and lingered just a moment longer than usual. I felt it then. What? I hadn't let myself feel at the auction or in the car or even that night when I had returned home. Relief. It didn't look like tears. It didn't sound like a sigh. It was quieter than all that. It was simply knowing that someone had shown up, not to take something, not to fix me, not to explain, but just to be there. She helped me in the kitchen, setting the table, putting out plates, warming the pie in the oven like she'd done it 100 times. When we sat down to eat, she looked at me and said, Mom told me some of what happened. I nodded. Some is probably the right word. She didn't defend it, Lily said quickly. She looked tired. I think she's scared, Nana, are you? Of what it means now that you said no. I sipped my tea. I've said no before. Not like this. I didn't argue. She's not evil, Lily added. She's just so used to being in charge. And when people like that lose control, they panic. She had no right. I know that was enough. I didn't need Lily to take sides. I didn't want her to. I changed. The will? I said gently. I hope that doesn't put you in a difficult position. She shook her head. It's not about the will. I studied her for a moment. You're a lot braver than I was at your age. She grinned. You don't know what I'm afraid of. But you show up anyway, I said. That's the part that counts. The pie, by the way, was wonderful. Flaky crust, tart sweet apples, just enough cinnamon. We talked for hours about books, about her job, about the guy she was seeing, whom she described as mostly tolerable, except when he tries to make quinoa from scratch. I laughed. I hadn't laughed like that in weeks. As we cleared the table, I saw her glance out the window. Is someone coming? I asked. She hesitated. Mom texted me this. Morning, said she might stop by. I felt the stillness settle back into the room. Not tension exactly, just the awareness of possibility. I didn't invite her, Lily added quickly. But I didn't tell her not to come either. I nodded and then, like a clock, responding to cue, the doorbell rang. We stood in the kitchen, silent. I looked at Lily. She looked at me. You don't have to open it, she said, but I already was walking. Jeanette stood on the porch in a long coat, her hair pulled back, a white envelope in one hand. I won't stay, she said, immediately. I had to hand this to you in person. I didn't answer. I just looked at her. She held the envelope out. It's the final signature. For the trust transfer, I had my lawyer sign off. I took it without a word, and I canceled the secondary access, she added. I had no business on your accounts. No, I said you didn't. She nodded, eyes fixed somewhere over my shoulder. I'm not asking you to forgive me, she said. But I want you to know I'm trying. Trying. Not fixing. Not pleading. Just that. I stepped back from the door. You can come in, I said quietly, but only as a guest. Jeanette hesitated, then stepped inside. She didn't ask where to sit. She didn't reach for anything. She moved slowly, like someone entering sacred ground they hadn't earned the right to walk. Lily joined us in the living room, handed her a cup of tea without a word, and for the first time in years, the three of us sat in the same room, not as family in a photo frame, not as roles we'd been assigned, but as women, each carrying her own damage, her own choices, her own grief. It wasn't a reconciliation. It was something quieter, more fragile, a beginning. Lily arrived just after noon on Saturday, her arms full of bags and her smile, too. Wide for someone who'd just driven 2 hours in the rain. I opened the door to the smell of wet pavement and cinnamon. Don't panic, she said, stepping in. I brought pie, and yes, I actually made it this time. Then we'll both be surprised by how it tastes. She grinned, kicked off her boots, and hugged me tight and warm and lingering just a second longer than usual. I felt it in that hug, the weight of the week, the undercurrent of worry, the small relief of presence. We moved through the kitchen like we always had. She set the pie on the counter. I poured the tea. Neither of us mentioned the auction or Jeanette or the quiet echo of what had nearly been taken. Not right away, but when we sat down, napkins unfolded and plates full, she looked at me and said, she told me. A little. I didn't ask who she meant. I just nodded. She didn't defend it, Lily added. She just said you'd made your position very clear. I did. She looked shaken. She should be. Lily hesitated. I think she believed it wouldn't matter, that you'd let it go. She's believed that for a long time. We ate in silence. for a while. The pie was surprisingly good, flaky, not too sweet, just the way I liked it. When Lily caught me nodding at the crust, she grinned. "See," she said, "I'm evolving." "I'm proud of you," I said, and I meant it more than she probably realized. She leaned back, tea in hand. "You changed your will." I did. "You don't have to explain. I want to," I said. "It's not because I love as you more. It's because you show up, because you see me, and because I want this house to stay with someone who understands what it means." Lily's throat moved as she swallowed hard. She didn't cry, but her eyes went soft. "I'll take care of it," she said. "When it's time." "I know." We cleared the table together the way we always had. She dried the dishes while I wiped the counters. Outside, the rain had slowed to a drizzle, soft as breath, and then the doorbell rang. She froze. I didn't invite her," Lily said, quickly. "She just said she might stop by." I nodded once, then walked to the door and opened it. Jeanette stood on the porch, coat damp at the shoulders, envelope in hand. "I won't stay," she said. "I just came to give you this." I took it unsealed. Inside a single page, her signature, finalizing the trust. "I also removed myself from all account access," she added. "You won't need to chase that down." "Good," I said. She hesitated, then added, "I'm not asking for a seat at the table, but I'm trying." I studied her face, the tightness, the flicker of shame behind. The eyes. "You can come in," I said, "but only as a guest." She nodded, and for the first time in years, she crossed my threshold, not as someone with expectations, but as someone who finally understood the weight of the door she'd once tried to close behind me. She didn't stay long. Jeanette sat on the edge of the living room armchair, legs crossed, hands folded too carefully in her lap, like she didn't know what to do with herself in this house anymore. She accepted a cup of tea from Lily with a quiet thank you and barely sipped it. I watched her eyes move across the room, the fireplace mantel, the framed photographs, the quilt over the back of the couch. Her gaze lingered on a photo of David holding Lily as a toddler, both of them mid-laugh. "This place hasn't changed," she said almost to herself. "It didn't need to," I answered. I looked at me then, not sharply, not defensively, just looked. "I used to. I think that meant you were stuck," she said, "that you were afraid to move forward. And now I think maybe I didn't want to see what you were holding together here because if I saw it, I'd have to admit I was letting go of something too quickly." Lily shifted in her seat but said nothing. She knew better than to interrupt. Jeanette set her tea down. "I don't expect forgiveness, Mom." "I'm not offering it," I replied. "Not today." She nodded. Fair. But she didn't get up to leave. She stayed, awkward in her stillness, as if waiting for something neither of us knew how to name. I thought of all the times I had held my tongue for her sake, the years I had made myself smaller to avoid her disappointment, her opinions, her thinly veiled corrections. I remembered the birthdays where she showed up late, the holidays where her smile was tight with obligation. I remembered, too, the way she used to include it, cling to my arm as a child in crowded stores, the way she once wept when I left her at college. We were not just mother and daughter. We were a long series of choices, some tender, some careless. "I don't want the house," she said suddenly. "I never did, really. I think I wanted control because you always felt out of reach. Because I stopped letting you run my life. Because I never understood how you could live so quietly, so completely without needing more." I sat back. Quiet isn't the same as small or weak. You mistake stillness for absence. She looked at her hands. "I was afraid of becoming you," she admitted. "Afraid of staying in one place and watching everything else move on without me." "You were afraid of staying," I said. "And I was afraid of leaving. We built opposite lives. And now I'm not afraid." She blinked at that, looked down. "Again, I don't know what to do with the space between us." "You don't have to do Anything with it, I said. You just have to stop pretending it's not there. That silence again, not angry, not even sad, just full of things we hadn't said and maybe never would. She stood finally. I'm going to go, she said, but I'd like to come back. Not to manage, just to visit if that's allowed. I nodded. It is on my terms. She didn't argue. Lily walked her to the door. I didn't follow. I listened to the soft exchange between them. No raised voices, no tension, just the sound of goodbye. When Lily returned, she carried the teacup Jeanette had barely touched. She rinsed it without a word. Do you think she'll mean it? She asked finally. About coming back? I think she's trying. That doesn't fix it. No, I said, but it's a beginning. We sat together for a while after that. No noise, but the occasional creak of the floorboards beneath our chairs and the rustle of wind through the trees outside. You okay, Nana? Lily asked. I took a moment before answering. Yes, I said. For the first time in a long time, I think I am. The next few weeks passed in a quiet rhythm. Jeanette didn't visit again, right away, but she called once, just once. It was a short conversation, stilted, with long pauses, as if we were speaking through a fog neither of us could quite clear. But it was polite, cautious, civil. That was a beginning, too. Meanwhile, I returned to my own life, the one I'd nearly let slip away under the weight of someone else's certainty. I started going back to the library. Again on Thursday mornings. The women there always saved me the chair by the window, the one closest to the heating. Vent in winter. I spent long afternoons tending the yard. The roses needed pruning, and the ivy by the fence had begun creeping too far again. There was a comfort in putting my hands in the dirt, in coaxing beauty from something wild. It reminded me that I still had time, still had power, still had the right to tend what was mine. I even started baking again. I'd stopped for a while after David died, just one of those little things that felt too quiet without someone to share it with. But now I made bread on Sundays, the kind he used to love. I wrapped the extra in parchment and then gave it to neighbors. Not because I needed the company, but because I liked the exchange, something warm passing from hand to hand. No expectations, no noise. Lily came by most weekends. She didn't always stay long. She had a life, a job, her own apartment filled with plants and chaos, but she always came. She brought stories, laughter, sometimes her laundry. I didn't mind. One Saturday, she brought a book with her. You should read this, she said, placing it gently on the coffee table. The main character reminded me of you, Lily said one afternoon, holding a book in her lap. I glanced at the cover, a woman on a porch, staring out at an endless field. She doesn't do much, Lily added, thoughtful, but somehow everything around her changes. I smiled faintly. Sounds familiar. We didn't talk about Jeanette often. Sometimes Lily would mention her in email, a short exchange, a moment of irritation, but she never tried to excuse her mother's choices. I loved her for that. It wasn't her burden to carry. Still, I knew she watched both of us carefully, carrying a quiet hope like a candle cupped in her palms. One cool afternoon, we sat side by side on the porch, sipping tea. Lily asked softly, "Do you miss her?" I didn't answer right away. The pause stretched between us, heavy, honest. "I miss what I thought we might have," I finally said. "But no, I don't miss being managed." Her eyes searched mine. "Do you think she'll ever change?" "She already has," I said, steady. "Just not in all the ways I wanted. And that's okay." Lily nodded, her face pensive. "I think she's scared of becoming you. She told me that once, but I think she's even more scared of ending up alone." "She's not alone," I said. "Not if she learns how to be honest." It wasn't bitterness that shaped my words. It wasn't wisdom either. It was just the truth, plain and unadorned. That evening, after Lily had gone, I found myself at the piano. Dust rose when I lifted the cover, and my fingers, stiff with time, hovered uncertainly over the keys. At first the sound stumbled, halting, as though the instrument itself were testing me. But then something settled, a rhythm, A memory, a joy I had forgotten was still inside me. The melody was simple, old, a tune David once hummed absent-mindedly while working in the yard. I played until the outside light dimmed, amber melting into blue, then into darkness. The room grew quiet, but not hollow. Never hollow. It was filled with something new, a peace I hadn't known I still deserved. For the first time in months, I wasn't thinking about what might be taken from me next. I thought instead of what I still had. The letter came in mid-November, a plain envelope, no return address, but the handwriting was unmistakable. Jeanette's, neat and formal, a little too stiff. I sat at the kitchen table for a long moment before opening it, the way I had once done when her letters came from summer camp or college or those first shaky work trips. Back then, her words had been scraps of her life mailed home to be held. This one felt heavier. Inside were 2 handwritten pages. The first line stopped me. I didn't know how to say this aloud. I read slowly. There was no rush in me, no excuses in her words. Instead, she wrote about fear, about watching me age, and not knowing what to do with it. About how control had become her reflex, a substitute for closeness. About how she had convinced herself that taking charge was the same as caring. "I think I forgot you had a life before me," she confessed. "You knew things long before I ever stood on my own feet. Somewhere along the way, I stopped looking at you. I started managing you, like a task." She wrote about the house, not just the sale, but the memories. The crayon drawings hidden on the walls, the staircase where she had once cried over a boy who left her broken-hearted, the kitchen where I taught her to crack an egg without spilling shell. "I thought selling it would protect us from the mess of aging," she admitted. "I see now it would have erased everything." There was no grand apology, no dramatics, just a quiet reckoning. Near the end, she wrote, "I understand if you don't want me back in your life the way it was. I only ask that, if there's space, maybe we can build something new. Not mother and daughter as before, just 2 women trying not to disappear." I folded the letter carefully, smoothed the creases, placed it on the table, and let it rest there while the kettle warmed. She hadn't asked for forgiveness, and I respected her for that. What she offered wasn't a fix. It was a door, cracked open, an invitation, without pressure. That evening, I walked the yard in my coat, hands buried in my pockets. The November sky stretched pale and gray, bare branches scratching against it like ink strokes. The cold made the silence different, less like absence, more like pause, a stillness before change. I thought of the weight of silence we had carried for years. Every missed birthday, every unsaid word, every sigh swallowed, and how, with 2 pages, the silence had begun to loosen its grip. I didn't know what would come next. I didn't know if we would ever be what people called close. But I knew this. She saw me now. Not as a mother to be managed, not as a relic in a house she couldn't understand, but as a person, a woman with boundaries, with breath. That was something. The next morning, I wrote her back. Just 1 page. I told her I had read her letter, that I believed her, that I was willing to try not to forget, not to go back, but to begin again, equal, honest, grown, and at the end I added 1 line. "If you ever come back to this house, the door is open, but you walk through it as my guest, and you leave your clipboard at home." I signed only my name. No mom, no title, just me. When I stepped outside to mail it, the cold bit at my cheeks, but it didn't sting. It felt clean. She came again in December. No warning, no announcement, just the low crunch of tires on frozen gravel. I stood at the window as she stepped from the car, scarf wound tight, hands bare despite the wind. No bag, no clipboard, only a silver tin wrapped with a red ribbon. I opened the door before she could knock. "I brought ginger snaps," she said, as though it were the most ordinary thing in the world. "Of course you did," I answered, stepping aside. She entered quietly, removed her coat, took off her shoes, every gesture careful, deliberate. She didn't ask where to sit this time. She waited. "Tea?" I asked. She nodded. "Please." We moved through the motions together, boil, pour, steep in silence that didn't weigh. The kind of silence that once belonged to us, before things had broken. In the living room, she set the tin on the table but didn't open it. At last she said, "I read your letter 3 times. I didn't know one page could hold so much. You used to say that about recipes." A small smile. "This is a small one, but real. I didn't expect you to answer," she whispered. "You didn't expect a lot of things," I said. She winced, nodded. "No, I didn't." The house was warm. The radiator hummed. Outside, bare branches shivered in the wind. Inside, we sipped our tea. The stillness pressed everything closer together. After a while, she lifted the lid of the tin. "They're from your recipe," she said. "I had to dig through old notebooks to find it." I took one, broke it in half. The scent rose instantly, ginger, molasses, clove-like memory itself. "You didn't burn them," I said. She smiled. "I made 3 batches." We ate in silence. No lectures, no confessions, just the crisp snap of cookies, the comfort of shared time, and the delicate repair of something once shattered. She stayed for an hour. She didn't rush. She didn't fix. When she rose to leave, she didn't say, "See you soon." She said, "Thank you for letting me in." And I answered, "Thank you for coming as yourself." I stood at the window, watching her drive away, the tin under her arm, now half empty. The house settled around me, not hollow, not heavy, simply breathing. Later, I returned to the piano, pressed a few soft chords into the evening air, then took up my blue notebook. I wrote not to Jeanette, not to Lily, but to myself. A page, maybe 2, about what it means to stay, to guard your space, to speak when silence would be easier, to begin again, even when the years press heavy against your chest. I closed the notebook, poured another cup of tea, and let the moment rest. I hadn't won anything by the world's measure. There was no courtroom vindication, no sweeping apology, no ribbon-cut victory. But I kept my house. I kept my name. I kept my voice. And in the quiet accounting of a long life, that is more than enough. If these words touched something in you, share them, tell someone, or hold them close, because sometimes the strongest act is simply to remain where you are, unbowed, unapologetic. And sometimes the deepest power is in being seen.